Hello and welcome back to our Top Tips for SMEs video series with me, Philip King and Blue Chain. I'm excited to introduce Persse, who is Chief Exec of Optimum SME Finance, who's going to be talking us through his top 3 tips for SMEs managing their cash flow. And please talk us through your top 3 tips.
Okay, so tip number 1 would be get your invoicing right. Get it in on time and get it to the right place. This will prevent you from seeing potential disputes or slow payments down the line. Top tip number 2 would be check the terms of payments. It's fantastic to get that next big sale, but knowing that you're not necessarily going to get paid immediately can have repercussions on your cash flow moving forward. So knowing that you're going to get paid in 30, 60 or 90 days time will help you budget and understand what you need to accommodate in terms of your future payments, etc. And top tip number 3 is don't panic. There's lots of help out there. There's advice, there's support, there's information that's available, but also there are solutions that can help you, like invoice finance. So you could actually fast track the payments of your invoices to mean that you do get your cash a lot sooner than having to wait for those payment terms that I mentioned in top tip 2.
Thanks, Anne. Some great practical advice there. And now we're going to delve a bit deeper into Ant's great 3 tips. And I'm delighted we're now joined by Tim Annis, who is Chief Executive of Blue Chain.
Thanks, Philip.
And your first tip was around getting invoicing right. You obviously see invoices that have been produced by a company that you're now having to chase. What are the most common things you see that are preventing invoices getting paid, that people get wrong?
It's very simple. It's usually a very simple error or a simple mistake. It's missing something off. It might be that you operate against a purchase order and you haven't referenced that purchase order. So then you get really close to the due date, or even at due date, the payment hasn't been received and you simply need to get a purchase order number. And if you put that on the invoice from the offset, then you probably wouldn't need to chase. The payment would come in on time. There are other things, simply putting the due date, putting your bank account details on the invoice, putting the description of the products or services that you've provided. All of these are things that will enable there to be less questions or disputes around non-payment of an invoice.
I'm always amazed when I see an invoice, and I see a fair few, not too many with this, thankfully, but ones with no bank details on. How am I going to pay you? It's not not necessarily my job to chase that down. So yeah, it's an easy thing to perhaps miss, but critical to have on there.
Absolutely, and for some, not paying is convenient, right?
Yeah,
because it helps their cash flow.
Yeah. Don't give them the excuse.
Don't give them the excuse, exactly.
Yeah. What, and when I think about some of that, checking the terms of the invoices that are coming through, if you look at those, for me, when I'm working for Blue Chain, it's what's our cash position, what's our burn rate, what's the terms that we're agreeing to on something, and how does that fit into that long-term plan? And it's really difficult to juggle. Is that the sort of things that you're talking about when you say when you made your point around check the terms?
100%. So what we see time and time again is organizations, businesses making that next big sale, getting the euphoria of it. There's nothing like selling your product or service, and that product or service, you've probably done your numbers and it's going to be profitable. But actually businesses don't fail or don't run into problems because they're not profitable. They run into problems because they don't have cash. So knowing when you're going to get paid is absolutely pivotal, because it's knowing when that payment is going to come in will enable you to pay your wages to your team, pay any other trade creditors, potentially HMRC. It's all really, really important to understand when you're going to get paid by your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen quite a lot of scenarios where you're looking at that, in previous roles as well, where you're looking at terms and you're trying to extend them or you're trying to draw them in. And that's where you start to hit, you're not paying your suppliers because you're not getting paid. that has a knock-on effect to the overall supply chain, right? So, other people are doing that to you in the same instance and things like that. So it's kind of the better practice you can deliver. You're delivering that across the whole market, aren't you? I know that sounds a bit trite, but
it's absolutely right. I mean, the other thing is that you could be impacting on your own business's credit risk profile, because terms of payment and not paying on time are things that get recognized by the credit reference agencies. And it might be that you are unable to pay your suppliers. You end up with them chasing you, maybe getting a CCJ to push you or something like this, and it can have catastrophic impacts in your ability to obtain finance, to get credit from some other or future suppliers. So it's really important to make sure that you fully understand what the terms of payment are that you're going to be trading on.
And that reinforces the point, doesn't it, Ant, about making sure you put the terms on the invoice so that there's no misunderstanding. I've talked to SMEs who say, I thought it was 30 days and the supplier thought it was 90 days and we had a 60-day gap in the middle. And that only came to light when payment didn't arrive. So getting that, that agreed and negotiated up front is really, really important. You're looking at other people's invoices. So how often do you see the terms either quoted as they should be or not quoted?
Frequently. So it depends. So to your point, it's about that communication between the buyer and the supplier, having that clear understanding on both sides of the fence. I mean, you've just highlighted that there was a disparity between a relationship with an SME that you spoke to. That happens all of the time. Whose terms are you actually operating on? Is it yours or is it your customers? And that's where putting them clearly on your invoice sort of almost draws the line in the sand and lets them know which terms you're going to be paying on.
That's great. Okay, thank you. Now I want to get to probably the final tip, but the most important one, because this is your world and your area of expertise. And you started it by saying don't panic, which I think is good advice. But for a small business, particularly a micro business or a self-employed or sole trader, they're good at what they do. Invoicing and finance isn't their bag. Managing cash flow is almost a nuisance, not a part of the business, even though we all know how important it is. Where typically do SMEs go for finance when they're running short, in your experience?
So generally, they will go loans, overdrafts, credit cards, friends and family. These are the normal sources of accessing liquidity. And they often forget that what they have available to them is sales. So the primary proceeds of cash come from your sales. So what we do in an invoice finance world is we actually fast track those payments. So you don't have to wait the 30, 60, 90 days or whatever the terms are. You can get paid straight away.
Okay, so talk me through how that works. And in reality, I'm a small business. I've got 3 or 4 invoices outstanding for 5, 10, 20 grand. How do I raise funds against those invoices?
So you would engage an invoice financier like Optimum Finance. We would have a discussion with you to understand your business a bit better and your cash flow requirements. We would then look to purchase. So there's a thing called a debt purchase agreement. So we would purchase your receivables, and then you would then ask your customers to pay into a designated trust account, which effectively means that we would get the funds to us, but we would advance you, say, 90% of your 10 grand you just mentioned, so £9,000 straight away.
And what if I didn't want to tell my customer that there was a different account to pay into, because I thought they might misread that as some sort of negative sign?
Yeah, that's a great point, Philip. So actually, we operate with 3 different products, and what we call them is there's a disclosed product, which means that we will be disclosed to your customers. So we tell them there's a notice of assignment of your invoices, and we tell them that you are fast tracking those payments. You've sold them to Optimum. And then there is and that's under a product called factoring. And actually with that product, we offer additional services such as credit control and credit management solutions as well. And then we have the ones where your SME says, I don't want my clients or customers knowing that I'm using invoice finance. We have something which is undisclosed, and that's under a product which is called confidential invoice discounting. And the product is pretty much the same, as in we would still advance the funds against your invoices, but it's confidential. Your customers are not aware of it, and we don't do any of the chasing of your payments or anything like that.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's fine. So that's a good distinction. In reality, though, Ant, how easy is it? I mean, if I'm going to pay with a credit card, I've just got to wave the card and pay. That seems simple. Invoice finance sounds to me like it's a bit more complicated. So is it, or am I overthinking it?
I like to think of it in a really simple way. What we do is we help you accelerate the payments of your invoices. So effectively, and we make it as simple as we can as well. So you load your ledger, it comes to us, and we will free up access to liquidity for you.
And so one of the things I can imagine running through a small business owner's mind is, so you're like a bank, and probably that sends a small shudder down their spine of the thought of, so I've got to deal with a bank, and they're envisaging mounds of paperwork and process and gates and hoops. And is that, because that's one of the routes I would expect them to think, I'll go to my bank and ask them for money and probably get rejected.
Yeah.
And then they kind of tar everything with that brush, don't they? Well, I'm never going to be able to get money. How does it sit in that world?
So we are not a bank. I think we exist because of some of the weaknesses that banks have. We offer a very personable service. Clients can talk to us as much or as little as they want, and we are always there to support. So you're right, Tim. Businesses often go to a bank as the first port of call, and then they find an organisation like Optimum Finance and tend to stay with us because we act effectively as an extension to their business. We offer the additional services. When I mentioned don't panic earlier, there is advice, support. Businesses like ours deliver that, and we do that in droves.
I mean, that's powerful as well. Just as a final thought from me is the ability to outsource some of that stuff. Collecting on payments is hard work. It certainly can be very hard work, and it can be uncomfortable and painful work sometimes. And you're having to deal with customers. So there's kind of that balance of, do I want to chase them, but I need to get that money? And being able to get an expert or a partner who is doing this day in, day out probably is invaluable for a lot of small businesses, because it lets them do that thing that they want to do rather than chase bills.
100%. So lots of businesses understandably don't want to have that awkward conversation with their customers for fear of what's it going to do to our relationship. We have a team of highly skilled professional credit controllers that do this day in, day out and maintain the relationships between our clients and their customers.
Yeah, that's really powerful.
So what you're doing is you're effectively just turning invoices into cash and taking the worry away from a small or micro business that's laying there awake at night worrying that the payment isn't going to arrive. The question I haven't asked you, Ant, and I guess any SME watching this is going to be thinking it, is what's it going to cost me? Because interest rates are going up. If I'm making a margin of 10, 15%, can I afford to lose that in paying someone to pay me early? What's the sort of monetary process here?
I mean, there are two primary fee sources that we would apply. The first one is a service fee. So we apply a fee for the service of our credit control solutions, credit management, and reconciliation, because that's a big piece as well, reconciling your payments. And the second piece then is what we call a discount, which is almost like an interest for the funds that you borrow.
Okay. And that's comparable with other sources of finance, I'm guessing.
Absolutely, more than, because you get a lot more service provision and support, and taking away that anxiety of not getting paid, not having cash. We look for reasons to support businesses, not reasons not to.
Okay. So if I'm a micro business and I've only got, 10 customers, say, I'm pretty small, but I've got a lifestyle business. Can you cope with that, or do you need a ledger of 100 businesses in order to manage?
Absolutely not. So our business deals with startups, so businesses that have are about to issue their first invoice, right the way through to businesses with turnover of up to, say, 15 million.
Okay.
And it is anywhere in between.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. Tim, anything else you want to ask or
I think I would just wrap up really to say, there's great solutions out there that, you perhaps aren't thinking of because you're thinking of your bank or your credit card or your friends and family. And, take advantage of them, search for some of the terms that we've come up with today, invoice discounting, factoring, confidential invoice discounting. There are ways that you can get money in your bank, and we all know that cash is king. So, I think it's definitely worth exploring no matter the stage of your business.
Thanks, Tim. And I hope that any SME watching this is just at least having a trigger in their thinking that says there are ways of looking at this and looking at cash flow other than just the traditional bank and friends and family. All that remains is for me to say thank you very much indeed to Ant for your time this afternoon, Tim for joining us, and watch out for the next video in the series of top tips for SMEs from Blue Chain.